In this episode, I had the chance to interview Sean Ellis. Sean Ellis is one of the founding fathers of growth hacking. He wrote like an incredible book a few years back called Hacking Growth that today I think it's still like one of the most important manuals if you're trying to really understand what's going on and really make sure that you can grasp how to make the best of where we are in AI. Now, Sean has a unique perspective, playbook, and really he gave us a few insights in the interview on how to make sense of where we are. So on a few things that we actually touched together with Sean is actually the understanding that where we are at the moment with AI, actually go to market has become critical because again, you really need to understand, especially when it comes to like open-ended AI interfaces, what is the use case that you're actually going to tackle. And therefore with Sean, we touch upon all those topics, and really I hope you enjoy this conversation and to understand what's going on right now and what may be coming next in terms of like playbook. Sean, I'm super glad to have you with me today. It's really an honor. So thank you for joining this chat.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be on with you.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I was telling you before we recorded, like for me, you've been really the father in terms of like getting me started in this discipline because it's been like over a decade now that I've been like in the digital marketing world, startup world, and really it's been a pleasure to actually get the chance to get connected with all the frameworks and stuff that you put together over the years. So in your, for instance, at the moment, what is that you think is changing a lot in the discipline, especially right now with all the buzz and everything around AI?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really interesting because at first I thought, yeah, AI, from a growth perspective, AI is probably not going to be that different from other kind of growth products, other products I'd be trying to grow, and I'm discovering actually it's very different. Um, and it's I think there's certain companies that I've worked with that are similar, but most of them, they're kind of an incremental way of doing something different, and you can anchor on the old way, and you're essentially kind of selling maybe the benefits to a problem that the old way provided. But with AI, it's sometimes it's such a big improvement over the way people have done things in the past that it's really hard for them to anchor kind of on anything. And so you can't exactly go and buy some Google ads because there's a bunch of people searching for a thing that does this. And so yeah, how you get the word out, how you ultimately get new customers on the product. I'm finding it's very different. So I'm actually working with a company now. The company that I'm most hands-on with right now is AI in one of the I don't want to go too much into detail on it, but it's kind of in the medical space. So think like medicine, veterinarian, dental, one of those kind of areas. And yeah, it's been really interesting to have to rebuild a playbook almost from scratch on how I help them come to market.
Oh, wow. Interesting you say that. I would have imagined more like something around the lines, everything is changed, but nothing has changed, mostly from a growth targeting perspective. But interesting you say that. So what are the things that you're seeing really that are really, I wouldn't say like shocked you, but really surprised you in terms of like things that you expected? Because there are so many things and angles that we can look at. And as you
Yeah.
said, the whole distribution pipelines right now are changing. Like you look at
Mhm.
Google Ads, it's not like it used to be. Especially, I work in the space as well, and so there is a lot of cannibalization going on, a lot of behavioral changes as well. Like a consumer level, the way
Mhm.
people are searching is completely different. Google is pushing AI mode, which means like everything is changing from a
Yeah.
digital distribution perspective. So I'm quite curious to hear you on that point.
Yeah, I think it's probably good to kind of balance what is the same and what is different, because I mean, while I say everything's different, it's not really true. Like ultimately, product market fit is still fundamentally a very important part of growth. if your product ultimately does not become a must-have for people who use it in the right way, they're not going to keep using it, and without retention, you really can't grow long term for most businesses. Yeah, maybe if you're a one-off usage product, then that's okay. But for most businesses, you need to be able to retain customers to grow. And so to me, I think it's a lot of it comes down to the discovery side is the part that's different. And
Mhm.
in my experience, when I start to look at different AI companies, including the one that I'm working with now, but just the different AI products that I use, like so ChatGPT, for example, I'm using it many hours a day. Another product I use a lot is Lovable. So
Mhm.
yeah, AI coding, and in both cases, I did not discover those products in the way that I would typically discover something. Typically, I'd say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this. There's got to be a product that does this thing." Then I go out and look for it, and then I try a couple different products, and I ended up loving one. With those products, yeah, when I first heard about ChatGPT, I was working with a business called Bounce in Lisbon, Portugal, and I
Mhm.
remember it just had just come out, and a couple of the engineers were really excited about it, and other people, and I'm like, so what does this thing do? And I was like, that sounds kind of weird, but like, let me let me just try something. So the first thing I tried was I was like, I wonder if it'll help me come up with headline ideas for a landing page. And so I plugged in, okay, I have a product that does XYZ, and I'm thinking about just testing multiple different headlines, and can you give a few recommendations? And of course, a lot of them, maybe I said, give me 10 different ones. And maybe 5 or 6 of them were pretty dumb. Like I don't probably want to run those tests, but there was at least 3 or 4 that were like, wow, those are really good. I would definitely want to put those into rotation. And so in that case, it was like I could have done that without ChatGPT. I would have just had to
Mhm.
creatively come up with the headlines. But like once I had kind of discovered that use case, then it's the next use case, the next use case, and over time, I told lots of people about it. I heard other people telling lots of people, and to the point where it is now. I just in the last maybe week or two, I was at my mother's house, who she's in her 80s, and um, she's saying, "Oh, I downloaded ChatGPT. I have like this medical question I want to ask. I haven't kind of figured out how to use it. Can you ask this for me?" And so the fact that it's like, my mom's going to be a pretty late adopter in her 80s, and she's excited to try it, just shows that kind of rapid spread that's happened. And so
Mhm.
I think it's that word of mouth. So but if I now contrast like Lovable, I first heard about Lovable on Lenny's podcast, and essentially, I think what got me with Lovable was when he was they were he's like, I never do demos, but I think a demo is the best way to talk about this product. And I think he said something like, build a clone of Airbnb, and
Right, right.
and then he's like, wow, I can't believe it did that. And it actually looks good. And then he's like, hey, can you add this feature and that feature? And so as I'm just hearing how he's using it, the light bulbs are going off. And I think
Ideas
within,
come up.
yeah, within a
Mhm.
week, I had posted a blog post where I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. And, and now I'm again super active with it. I've been vibe coding an app now that I'm pretty excited about. I use it every day, and so it's sort of changed my day to day. And so we put this
Right.
across, like as I said, in the medical space, there's this AI tool set that I'm working with. We put this across all these different industries. I think it's so transformative that a lot of people are not going to be seeking it. So from a growth perspective, what do you do? If word of mouth is ultimately how you grow these products, then it becomes really important to get those early users on the products. And so my big hypothesis with AI is that go to market is now the most important growth lever. How you actually navigate that go to market process,
Agree.
and then
Yeah.
balancing the other side of that, we were just talking before we got started here that I just took a trip to Europe, and what part of the trip was I stopped in Vienna, just did a roundtable with some of the local startups, and a whole bunch of startups applied for it, and then we narrowed it down to a handful of startups to be in this roundtable. But almost every single startup that applied was an AI startup now. And so when you look at who's getting funding, what are the startups that are they're happy? Almost every startup that's coming out of the gates now has either AI enhanced or native AI. It definitely AI plays a big role. So as for me, I would say, well, I'm probably most recognized for kind of my role that I've played in growth in general. Really, my biggest kind of unique skill set is probably around the go-to-market side. And so that sort of the light bulb on a couple of things was like, okay, if the bread and butter, what feeds my family is these skills I've developed in go-to-market, and almost every new company is I better figure this out. And so
Hmm.
that's where a lot of just my, for the last, few months, it's been really that light bulb went off to where it's been, yeah, how do you really navigate go to market for
Hmm.
AI? And
For AI.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think
And
basically go ahead.
it's a great point. Like you're right. I think like go to market at the moment where everyone can access AI, especially because everyone can get, and this has been true like for the last almost 3 years, but everyone can get access to like an API endpoint of like whether it's like OpenAI, whether it's like Anthropic, whether it's like Gemini at the moment.
Mhm.
So as you said, like there are like different things that you can do, and there are like a few interesting angles there as well. As you say, there is one aspect is once you're going to get an interface like ChatGPT, it's open-ended, so you need to figure out the use case.
Yeah.
And if you're an AI startup, then you can go with many use cases.
Hmm.
And I think the best example out there probably is like Anthropic, right? So when you look at something like Cloud Code, a lot of people right now still don't get what it is. They still like
Hmm.
think is, oh wait, this is just for coding.
Yeah.
However, if you start playing with it for specifically for cloud code, you realize it's really an agent. It's like marketing automation. You can use it
Hmm.
for anything, but figuring out the use case is extremely hard because it requires a lot of creativity on your part. If you're
Right.
marketer, if you're like whatever domain expertise you're trying to apply, you really need to get that interface and apply it to your domain expertise. So as you say, 100%, I would say mistaking the go-to-market right now is probably the most expensive mistake that you can make as a startup. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and in the past, like so again, in the contrasting side of things, in the past, I've always been very incremental about how I take a product to market. That the mistake that people would make 15 or 20 years ago was they would try to launch with a big television campaign or something, and it's just like as soon as people find out about this, they're gonna love it. And I never took that approach. It was much more of like let me acquire 100 people, learn what they love, where they're getting stuck, make the fixes, acquire the next 100 people, emphasize the right things, test this channel in little bits. And if it works, do more of that. If it doesn't work, chalk it up to learning. And so this very incremental approach has been super effective. It's what we talked about in our book, Hacking Growth.
Mhm.
And it's how most growth people have done things for a long time. I think we're actually swinging back somewhat to the old way of doing things, as weird as that sounds, especially hard for me to say, where you have to kickstart that growth somehow. And so, like if you think about it sort of happened with network effect businesses. So have you ever heard about how Twitter launched? The launch of Twitter, as far as I have heard or understood, was that they launched at South by Southwest with a
Yeah.
very creative, essentially having kind of the leading the leading thinkers who were attending South by Southwest were basically sending tweets, and they had these large television monitors that were essentially streaming the thoughts of these people, and they're like, oh, how can I talk with this person? And so that sort of demo ended up bringing a lot of people on the platform. I think it's that type of creativity now that is how you bring a lot of these AI businesses to market. The challenge, of course, is you still have to make sure that you don't have a super high friction onboarding. You have to make sure that you're highlighting the right benefits. So there is a little bit of that, do things that don't scale first to get a handful of people on the product, to get that learning. But pretty quickly you want to think about, how do I get enough people on the product that I start to kick off that word of mouth growth engine and continue and improve on the fly. So it's definitely a lot of that learning process. But if ultimately word of mouth is going to be the main driver of growth on these products, then then that's, you really have to figure out how to unlock that word of mouth. And so the best proxy that I can think about of companies that I've taken to market over the years would actually be Dropbox. And so with Dropbox, when I went into Dropbox, I initially had this hypothesis that it would grow in a pretty similar way to how LogMeIn had grown, where word of mouth was important to LogMeIn, but paid search was actually probably the way that we got most of our initial users. And even for LogMeIn, the reason paid search worked well for us was that we were kind of second to market. We had a competitor that was spending a lot of money on television advertisements that and radio advertisements that had kind of built up awareness of the space. And so we then created a free version of what their core value proposition was, and then built a business model to upsell from that free to paid. Today we would call that a freemium model, but at the time it was pretty novel. And so search for us was essentially not differentiating, but saying, yeah, remote access your computer for free. And so they're essentially seeing the same capabilities that attracted them on a television commercial, and now they're seeing, wow, through a Google ad that they can do it for free. And so that drove that business. So when I thought, okay, I'll do something similar. So when I left LogMeIn, it was about 6 months later that I started at Dropbox. I thought, I'll do something similar, but no one was looking for a product like Dropbox because it was so different in really what that value proposition was. There was some things, like it kind of was a backup proxy or file sharing. Like it had some sort of point things, but that ultimately, like the synchronizing folders was kind of that must-have use case, and people just didn't even know to look for that. And so we invested heavily in unlocking that word of mouth chain, which became one of the most well-known referral programs that a lot of people tried to model after it. But we had that theory, like, okay, no one knows to look for this, so we're going to have to take our super passionate early users and build a growth engine off of those. And so I think that's a similar playbook to what will work with most AI companies. And again, when I say I think that's a similar playbook, it's really working backwards from what I'm seeing working well for AI companies today and saying, okay, how do we, as growth people, actually harness that and hopefully accelerate faster. One more thing I want to highlight that we have to be aware of is that this stuff is scary for a lot of people. Early adopters, they're gonna jump on it. But even in a business use case, like, they have their way of doing things. They don't want to have to learn something completely different and change their workflow. And so recognizing that complexity is a major barrier to adoption. And so just saying it's gonna change everything and that big vision actually can be pretty scary for people too. And so again, I think that lovable case of, like, make me a clone of
incremental.
Airbnb, oh, I can get my head around that quickly. That sounds easy.
Yeah. And to be fair, I do work as well a lot on the enterprise side, and on the enterprise side, there are many stats coming out, and there was like the latest also report by McKinsey. I think it came out just like a couple of days back or like just yesterday. But yeah, anyhow, it points out a little bit of still how hard it is to get those projects past the pilot stage. how hard it is to implement within an organization. And every here we can make a huge, we need to make like the difference between like consumer, B2B,
Yeah.
enterprise, which is, a key change, because in the enterprise it's going to be way more requiring like an organizational change. And as you say, you cannot go in and say this is going to change everything, also because most of the friction is going to be on how to make this scale inside the company.
Yeah.
Because again, you're going to get the scenario where you get a lot of very I would say super individual contributors that can do anything with AI. But then on the other side is you need to make sure that you're not leaving the other part of the team that still is staying in that department, because they're still like quite capable, but they have not adapted to AI yet.
Yeah.
You need to make sure they're not like behind. They need to learn from those like top performers also how to get some workflows and then implement it within the organization. So it's very complex, and I think
Yeah.
I
I think
agree
the
with you. It's
big question on the enterprise side will really be, will the existing solution providers adding a layer of AI to their products have a big advantage because it is so hard to break into the enterprise, or will a pure play AI solution disrupt those? And I don't know. I think that'll be a fascinating one to watch because
Mhm.
I think for me, like again on the consumer side, ChatGPT uh, opened a lot of people's eyes, mine in particular, to like what could be done with AI. And I ended up moving a lot of my use cases from Google to
Mhm.
ChatGPT. Now you see Google more and more pushing their AI results up, and you see those are pretty good. Interestingly for me, I mean, one other piece, and we'll go back to the enterprise, is ChatGPT has disrupted a lot of my Google usage, but Google is so much better at AI than Apple is up to this point.
Right.
I've been a
Agree.
long time iPhone user, but for the first time in probably a decade, I'm tempted to switch to Google because I love the power of AI in my hand, and I upgraded to the 16, and now the 17 is kind of really has that promise of AI, but it's not there. It's like you talk to Siri and it says, you want me to ask
Yeah. And
ChatGPT. It's so,
even that you're gonna get Gemini inside Siri is gonna be the way they're gonna upgrade their own Siri.
yeah,
If
it's
you,
exactly. It's that friction piece.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think that ultimately Google's distribution will help it play well in an AI world. Um,
Mhm.
and but the bigger mistake is that Apple's going to need to acquire someone to catch up, and because it's no longer a question of if you should have AI. It's a
Yeah.
requirement to be effective.
Yeah, and it's impressive that they stay behind. But again, like there was just the news like a couple of days back. They're gonna pay like 1 billion per year to like Google to integrate Gemini inside like Siri,
Oh,
which is
okay.
the
Are they? Yeah.
yeah, which is the way they're gonna do it as a first step.
Yeah,
Though
but
the
they sort of
interesting,
promised the same thing with ChatGPT
yeah,
also
yeah,
and OpenAI, and
yeah,
it was
and it
such a
didn't make it
flop
through.
that I don't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they don't
yeah,
have a ton of credibility that's going to be any better.
yeah, that's true. And you know what's interesting that even if it may work at this point because Gemini it's already served like in scaled like within Google with the AI mode, so it has already been tested at such scale that maybe it's going to work for Apple. They are trying to hide the fact, meaning that internally they name coding the project in a different way, so
Hmm.
that even when they market it to people, they're not going to say, "Look inside Siri, there is Gemini."
Yeah,
It's our stuff,
just be
even though
superpowered
it's not.
Siri. Yeah,
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
So,
but basically kind of where I was going with that
mhm.
analogy is that uh, ultimately it's pretty easy for consumers to switch from, to move that use case, say, from Google for a lot of things that I used to ask questions to Google to ChatGPT, or to switch from an iPhone to an Android device. Uh, it's a lot harder for enterprises to switch from one solution to another solution. And so it's really the question, but it's also really hard for, these big established companies, as you're seeing with Apple, to adopt AI in a way that they can be cutting edge with it. And so it's really going to be that balance. Does distribution, where you already have a major foothold in the enterprise, is that an advantage with sort of an incremental AI solution, or is the game-changing AI solution that has to break into the enterprise going to be the one that wins? And I don't know the answer, but I do
Me
think,
neither.
yeah, I do think that if it is going to be the game-changing AI that breaks into the enterprise, they're going to have to nail go to market. They're
Mhm.
going to have to be very, very creative about how to get it in there.
Yeah, very good. And on your side, what is the you see the most potential at the moment? Because especially looking at growth tagging at the moment as a discipline, you always said this is not like a single player mode. It's more like you need to play as a team. But then you got stuff like, as you said, lovable, where you can do many things as a domain expert in a few disciplines. You can use those
Mm.
tools and you can amplify yourself almost as if you were
Yeah.
like a growth tagging team. Do you see any change there, or you think it's going to be still the same? You're going to need like a growth tagging team that's going to be managing the whole growth initiative within like those companies.
Yeah, I mean, so much of growth hacking where it's really been effective has been more on the consumer and kind of
B2B.
if it's B2B, it's been really like B to small business.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so enterprise typically just doesn't have the kind of customer flow to iterate rapidly and optimize with data. Um, it gets a little different in the kind of land and expand world, where when you land in the enterprise and then use a product led growth motion to sort of expand usage and expand kind of feature usage and people usage, that starts to look more consumer. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I have a really hard time. Apple is one of the most powerful companies in the world, and the fact that they seem to be so far behind on AI really makes me question, can these kind of enterprise solutions actually create enough value with AI to be able to beat startups that are kind of built from the ground up with AI? Like, I'm not sure which one is the bigger challenge, the distribution challenge for the upstarts or the AI challenge for the kind of incumbents. And so yeah, I think both there's going to be a big battle on both sides, and both have to work really hard to try to beat the other side there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just as a closing remark on your side, what is that you're going to be focusing your attention on, especially coming into like 2026? What is that for you? It's the most interesting aspect where you're going to be really saying next decade, I want to be there.
For me, a lot of my focus right now is going to be studying the growth of, there's enough successes in AI. I want to work backwards from those successes and really understand their go-to-market and use those inputs to
Mhm.
to start to change the go-to-market that I've been using. So I have a yeah, I just keep it in front of me all the time here, but like my very kind of detailed step-by-step go-to-market. This playbook is the old playbook. And so what does the playbook look like when just everything has to move a lot faster, and you're going to face a lot more friction. So
Mhm.
these are the playbook has to evolve, but I think the parts that will continue to matter, this foundational work. I know listeners won't be able to read this, but the foundational work is really around the data and the deep understanding of product market fit. That still has to happen. You need to understand how your product really resonates with customers, but how you go from there to that rapidly scaling growth engine, I think will change, and is going to move back to, you're going to have to probably make some more aggressive swings and ultimately
Mhm.
kickstart a lot of word of mouth if you're going to grow more than a super unscalable, customer by customer, bringing them in. That unless that unlocks word of mouth, you're gonna probably run out of money before you can build any kind of meaningful business.
Yeah. What are you betting on? Like, especially case studies that you're looking at that would redefine, like, outside, like, OpenAI, of course. Who is
Yeah,
that?
I mean, there are so many of them. Like I have to look at all of them, and I think it's
You also said lovable, which is another
yeah,
case, of course,
lovable.
which
But
is very,
but I think Claude. I think
yeah.
what's really cool is that you have for every success, there's four or five that are also pretty successful, and that's on the consumer side where you're going to probably get more of a mix. But I don't know in the back it can kind of be like the early days of search engines where you had a bunch of them and then ultimately it became Google. So maybe it will ultimately become more of a winner takes all here, particularly
Mhm.
because there is value to models that are bigger, like advantage to more data going through those models. And so that's the other piece that I think is interesting. While I said the word of mouth and go to market are super interesting and important for AI companies, I do think a lot of the more, it's funny to say traditional now, but traditional growth actions and roles are going to be a lot more automatable where AI can learn and improve on its own without having teams there. In the short term, I think the
Mhm.
teams are still needed, but over time, I think more and more of the growth superpower is going to come down to go to market.
Amazing. Yeah. And of course, for whoever is going to be taking care of growth, most probably you're going to be able to really build up the system architecture where you're going to be handling like agents that take actions. And then
Exactly.
it's more like maintaining like an infrastructure
Yeah.
that keeps creating like those feedback loops. And I agree. It's where we're going.
Yeah, a lot more self-optimization like once you have that traction, but how do you get that initial traction? That's the swing point between
Yeah.
failure and success. Where in the past, again, you could be really patient
Mm.
and incremental to figuring out the parts, and over time, the engine would gain momentum, and then you kind of build a team around there to execute against the key levers. I think it's a lot more binary now. You either kind
Yeah.
of get breakout and then everything takes off, or you essentially run out of money where you're not able to
Interesting.
figure out how to get enough traction to start that flywheel of growth.
Yeah. So do you think it's fair to close with the remark where we say, okay, in the past you could have the chance to place more bets. Right now, you need to be very careful with the bet that you're going to be placing because this is going to define the entire startup, and it's going to be hit or miss pretty much.
uh I wouldn't quite go to that extreme, but what I would say is that the heavy grind is going to be upfront in the go to market, and that grind is maybe a combination of some big bets, but just trying a lot of
Mhm.
stuff, and and that uh and that you might say, gosh, it's not worth it. I'm not gonna be able to build a great business if I have to keep grinding like this, month after month for the next 100 months. But I think the reality is that you just need to do it for a few months until that flywheel starts spinning, and then it's much more of kind of building in the self-optimization pieces to it. But it's so like I wouldn't get too disheartened if I go back and kind of read the Paul Graham do things that don't scale kind of side of things where you're figuring it out, but
Super
recognizing you're going to
relevant.
have
Yeah.
to sprinkle some big bets probably on top of that.
Mhm.
Maybe not, but
Mhm.
but yeah, that the aha moment, getting people to that light bulb moment with the product is going to be the critical piece that unlocks growth. And so all of your experimentation is to figure out how can I efficiently get people to that aha moment. And once you are able to get them there, uh, that your dividends should start to pay off in a lot more word of mouth. But again, I wouldn't call myself as much of an enterprise expert, so I'm not sure how important the word of mouth will be on the enterprise side, if that will even make a difference.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And again, this is contextualized more like to the consumer, like B2B side, where
Yeah.
this is going to be super, super relevant. And yeah, looking for hopefully once this has been consolidated, we're going to get like a follow-up of Hacking Growth. I would, love to see that because it would be like super instrumental, especially in the next decade.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
I
guess
think
next
it's
two,
going to
3
move
years.
so fast that it would be really hard to capture it in a book. Like it,
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that in, almost 10 years now since we've published the book, sales have not slowed. They've accelerated over time because it's such a timeless kind of formula for growing businesses. But I'm not sure how like the fundamentals are there, but I'm not sure how much lasting it'll have over the next 10 years. And so that's where I don't know that a book, any kind of book, will have kind of a lasting formula going forward, just because things are moving so fast with AI now. Super exciting, but yeah, it's not a time to be able to kind of rest on, oh, I've figured everything out, therefore I'll know how to do everything going forward.
Yeah, amazing. But yeah, I would say I picked up again your book in the last few days, and it has been like many times. And again, as you say, it's super relevant today. Going back to that, I think it's critical. So let's see how it goes. And I guess even just like a refresh with some of the new case studies that we
Yeah,
get from AI is going to be super interesting to see.
absolutely. Awesome. Well,
Amazing.
thank
Thank you,
you
Sean.
for, yeah,
Appreciate it.
it's been a fun chat, and looking forward to seeing the end product.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean.